Let's dive into one of the weirdest, most unsettling stories ever written, Franz Kafka's The Metamorphosis. It kicks off with this totally bizarre, impossible event, but what it reveals about our lives, about work, family, and our own humanity is frighteningly real.
Seriously, just take a second and try to imagine it. You wake up one morning and you're not you anymore. You're a gigantic bug. Your arms and legs gone, replaced by these dozens of little legs just scuttling around. You try to speak, but all that comes out is a squeak. You're trapped.
So what's the first thought that goes through your head? Pure panic? Total despair? Maybe you try to scream for help? I mean, that's what any of us would do, right? But our main character, Gregor Samsa, his reaction is something else, and it's what makes this story so unforgettable.
He doesn't scream. He doesn't panic. Nope. He worries about being late for work. He's stressed about missing his train for his awful job as a traveling salesman. And that right there is the key to this whole thing. See, this isn't just a story about a guy who turns into a bug. It's about a world that had already made him feel like one long before his body ever changed.
So, here's our roadmap for unpacking this. We'll start with a quick look at the plot. Then we're going to dig into the big ideas like alienation and conditional love. From there, we'll get into the philosophy of it all before we finally uncover what the true metamorphosis of the story really is.
Okay, so before we get into the deep stuff, let's just do a super quick rundown of the plot, just to make sure we're all on the same page.
It all kicks off with the transformation. Gregor wakes up a bug, and his family, horrified and ashamed, basically locks him in his room. Now, at first, his sister, Great, she tries to take care of him. But as time drags on, she and the rest of them start to see him as just this disgusting burden. In the end, Gregor just wastes away, totally unwanted and ignored. And when he dies, his family doesn't feel sadness, they feel relief. It's a bleak story for sure, but the why behind it is what's so powerful.
And this brings us to one of the central themes, alienation. You gotta ask, did Gregor's problems really start the morning he woke up as a bug? Or was his transformation just the physical symptom of a sickness that was already there? This right here really gets to the heart of it. Think about it. Before he changed, Gregor the man was already being treated like a thing, not a person. He was overworked, totally underappreciated, and his family only saw him as a paycheck. After the change, as a bug, he's just an unwanted burden. His function changed, but the dehumanization, that was already there. He was already just a cog in a machine.
And you know, this flows right into the story's absolutely brutal take on relationships, especially family. What happens when the love people have for you is really just based on your usefulness? I mean, this timeline says it all, doesn't it? When Gregor was the provider, paying all the bills, he was loved. He was essential. But the second he can't do that anymore, he's just an inconvenience. And by the end, any hint of affection is completely gone. Kafka's showing us how terrifyingly fragile relationships can be when they're built on what you do for someone, not on who you are.
It all comes down to this really harsh truth, doesn't it? That so often, people value you for the role you play, the provider, the helper, the employee, not for the actual person you are inside. And the moment you can't play that role, your value disappears.
Now, one of the things that can drive you crazy reading this story is that we never find out why this happened to Gregor. And let me tell you, that's completely on purpose. It plugs us right into this big philosophical idea, existential absurdity. Existential absurdity. It sounds complicated, but the core idea is pretty simple. It's the notion that the universe doesn't owe us any explanations. Horrible, random, violent things can happen for no reason at all. Life can get turned upside down in a second, and there's no guarantee you'll find some deep cosmic meaning in it.
And that's the point Kafka absolutely refuses to let us escape. There's no reason, no cause, no neat little lesson at the end. Gregor didn't do anything to deserve this. It just happened. By refusing to give us a reason, Kafka forces us to stare into the face of a world that is often just as random and just as cruel.
So, what does that actually do to a person's mind? What happens when everyone you know and love starts treating you like, well, a monster? This is about the slow, painful process of losing your own identity.
It is absolutely terrifying to watch how Gregor's sense of self is just dismantled, piece by painful piece. He loses his job, then his ability to move around freely. He loses his voice. They even empty out his bedroom, his last personal space. Eventually, he becomes exactly what they see him as, a nuisance, a burden. His human mind is still in there, but it's trapped in a shell that the world has decided is worthless.
And this is the truly chilling result. The way the world sees you starts to become the way you see yourself. If everyone around you treats you like you aren't human, how long before you start to believe them?
Which brings us to our final and maybe the most important point of this entire story. We've been talking this whole time about a physical change, but Kafka was pointing to a different kind of metamorphosis, one that's far more terrifying because it happens all the time.
And here it is. This is the core insight. The real metamorphosis isn't when Gregor's body changes. It's a social transformation. It's what happens when the world decides a person is no longer useful and therefore no longer has value. Gregor's insect body is just a giant, terrifying metaphor for what we do to people, the elderly, the unemployed, anyone we label a burden when we stop seeing their humanity.
And so, Kafka leaves us with this haunting question, one that feels more urgent today than ever before. In a world that is constantly screaming at us to be productive, to be useful, what happens to us? What happens to our humanity when our value is tied only to what we can do? It's a dark thought, and it's the one the Metamorphosis makes sure we can't forget.